everybody, and welcome to another Top 5 board gaming video. Today we have a video that is rather uniquely structured compared to a lot of my other videos. It's a category that is really commonly looked at and something that a lot of people have discussed in numerous different ways. Because, let's face it, there are a lot of games out there. Literally tens of thousands of different games. And the problem is, as somebody who is new to the hobby, you might be thinking, holy crap, where do I start with this? This makes no sense. Some of you may be lucky in that you have a friendly local game store, you have a meetup group, whatever it happens to be, you can go to, you can try out a bunch of games and see what you like. Some of you may not be so lucky, others you may have friends or family members or whatever who are like me and super crazy and have a whole bunch of different games that you can try out in some way, shape, or form. The goal for this video is really to show you guys some good starting games. Right now, I've done videos similar to this in terms of games that are good for like transitioning from the games like Monopoly and Life and Sorry and those kinds of things, like the board games we all grew up with, into the more hobby style games. The goal for this particular video, rather, is if you sort of want to jump in feet first, and my goal for this was to discuss games that not only act very well as starter games, that is to say they're relatively simple, easy to play, easy to pick up, fun, versatile, and most importantly have a lot of replay value, but there were a couple of other things as well. I wanted to look at games that you could really build off of. If you enjoyed the mechanics of game X, then you would probably also like games A, B, C, and D. You know, that kind of thing. That's what I really wanted to do. So as I go through this video, that's what I'll be discussing a lot about, is based off of the mechanics of these specific games I talk about, you may also enjoy blah 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 blah. So just think of me like Google Ads for a day or so. It'll be fun. It'll be fine. The other really major thing for this video is that I endeavor to pick games that are not only readily available, but also pretty inexpensive. That is one of the biggest hurdles with getting into this hobby, is that a lot of these games are tremendously pricey, especially with some of these newer Kickstarter games that are coming onto retail shelves. We're talking about $100, $150 for some of these things. Now granted, they're gorgeous. We've got amazing miniatures, all this kind of stuff, but at the same time, if somebody is coming into the hobby, you're not going to want to spend $100 on a single item that you don't even know if you're going to like. So all of these games, relatively inexpensive, very easy to get though, which is arguably more important, and on top of that, you can build off of them very easily. So if you enjoy them, then you'll also enjoy blah 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 blah. With that, I hope that you enjoy this video. As always, please put any and all thoughts in the comments below, whether it's discussing games that you believe fill this category, which again, there are lots and lots of. I didn't go by specific categories of games, for example, worker placement and war game and thematic heavy and all that kind of stuff. I will discuss it, but I didn't go specifically by that. Are those things that you're interested in more so? Would you rather hear more about the games that they expand to? All that kind of stuff. I would love to hear it. You guys know that I'd love to. That said, we're going to be getting started with something very special, in that we have one honorable mention. Our honorable mention today is a very fun, very quick card and, well, sort of dice game that I have talked about in numerous different ways, and frankly, I take to board game nights every single time I go. The game itself is Biblios. In this game, the idea is that you and up to 3 other players are playing as essentially an order of monks who are trying to collect up artifacts and manuscripts and all this kind of stuff that are represented by different colors. And as you collect these, then you're getting different values, you're also getting money, and after a while you have sort of a drafting aspect, and then after the draft you have an auction phase. Once the auction phase is done, everybody counts up what they've got, and then you take dice representing points, and then you count up the number of points. Whoever has the most wins. If you're interested, I did do a review and gameplay demo for Biblios, so you can check it out for all of the details. That said, as I mentioned, I take this to board game nights every single time that I go, and that is a big part of why this is an honorable mention. I put this as an honorable mention for 2 reasons. First reason is that I saw this on my shelf and I was like, I have to add Biblios to this video. The second reason is because I said, well, Biblios is awesome and I play it all the time. Literally, this is one of the games that hits the table for me more often than pretty much any other game nowadays. It is a wonderful filler game, very, very easy for people to learn. It gives you a good mix of different game mechanics. We've got a drafting mechanic, we've got a sort of tableau building mechanic where you've got a set collection type of thing, we've got a long and short-term strategic decision making, plus we've got an auction phase as well. So we've got a lot going on in a very small, fast-playing package. And those are the real main reasons for it. As far as building up, that's really why it's an honorable mention, is that yes, things build off of Biblios or remind me of Biblios, but I would rather play this, frankly. It is a really well done game. But if you enjoy Biblios or specific aspects of it, there are several other ones that do a lot of things very similarly. The drafting aspect, where you're taking one card at a time and looking at it, there's Seven Wonders does that very, very well also. Another very, very well designed and also really heavily set collection oriented game as well. Auction mechanics are used by a lot of different games. We've got things that are auction centric, such as Going, Going, Gone or Modern Art or things of that nature. And then we've got games that utilize auction as a mechanic, but it is either not central or it's it's just like a piece of a whole type of thing, where you've got things like Power Grid or Stockpile and things of those nature. Again, great games, and if you like that aspect of Biblios, then you would probably like those other games. As a general sort of, not equivalent, but a game of general similarity, you can also have Splendor. Splendor is it's a very distinctive tableau building game, but it behaves similarly to Biblios in a lot of ways. So it is a step up from Biblios in terms of complexity and planning, because you've got a limited amount of resources. In Biblios you do as well, but with as far as Splendor is concerned, you can do more planning ahead, whereas with Biblios, then you're blind drawing from a deck. So you might not necessarily know what's coming up. But that said, again, honorable mention, because first off, I knew it needed to be on this list, and secondly, I personally don't really prefer the games that build off of this. I prefer Biblios itself. Oh, that was the other one. Race for the Galaxy was the other major tableau building game I wanted to mention. Obviously extremely complex in terms of the actual tableau styling and symbols and synergy and all that kind of stuff, but at the same time, a great game nonetheless. Either way, Biblios, very fun. My honorable mention for this list. Getting to the main list, these are in general not really in any particular order. There are a couple that are in certain positions for various reasons. I will explain why, but by and large it's not because I really don't prefer a specific game more than the other. That said, at number 5 we have Dominion. Now Dominion is the sort of quintessential deck building game. I don't know personally if this is the original deck building game, but I do know that Dominion is the game that brought deck building more into the limelight, so to speak. For those of you who don't know, deck building is the idea where you are purchasing cards during the game and putting it into a personal deck. And you have your own deck of cards that you're drawing from, you play cards from the deck, discard them, and then you reshuffle your personal deck, and so you are literally building up your own deck, which means you've got a lot of replayability, a ton of versatility, because you can swap out the different cards that you're able to purchase. You've got a decent amount of player interaction, because there are some cards that allow you to attack other players. In addition, once a stack of cards runs out, then obviously you can't buy them anymore. So you may have to change your strategy up a little bit as you're going through. But either way, Dominion, like I said, it is a very quintessential example of a deck builder. That said, it is not by any means my favorite deck builder, right? This is one that you can, again, you can get it very readily. The second edition just did come out, so this one, the first edition, might be sort of like phased out a little bit. The second edition, I believe, swapped out 6 or 8 cards, something like that. I have not played it, so I don't know exactly how it changes gameplay, but from what I've heard, it's not really a whole lot. That said, I mean, Dominion is Dominion. You know, you get it, you do your deck building, and it is a solid game. I just prefer other ones more. For example, Dominion Intrigue is one that I always say I like more than this because it adds a lot more elements of player interaction and attacking and all that kind of stuff. The other major set of games that I really prefer are the Legendary deck building series, where you've got Marvel Legendary, you've got Legendary Encounters, and then you've got Legendary Predator. Another great example that is also very thematic is the DC deck building game. Plus, if you want something that is more thematically similar to Dominion, you've got Thunderstone as well as Thunderstone Advance. And that's sort of the more like fantasy element type of thing if you prefer that. Again, though the other games have a lot more interaction amongst the other players. A lot of them are also cooperative, which is really, really nice because you get more versatility in that sense. But again, if you want to go quintessential, if you want to go classic, you got to go Dominion. And the other big thing is that it is cheaper than most of the other games as well. You might be able to get some cheaper on a sale or whatever. And again, this particular edition might be phased out relatively soon. But even so, Dominion is my number 5. At number 4, I've got a party game that I have talked about a lot in numerous different contexts, but primarily actually really this one is how much fun it is and how easy it is to play and all this kind of stuff. The game itself is The Resistance, right? So this is by no means the first social deduction game, and nor is it by any means going to be the last social deduction game. It does happen to be my favorite of the category though. I really, really enjoy this. The idea behind the game is that everybody is assigned a role. You are either a member of the Resistance or a spy. Everybody is voting on who goes on a mission. You play either a pass or a fail card, and then we see how everything did. If you are interested, I did do a review and demo for this game as well, so you can take a look at all of the details for this, just like with Biblios previously. That said, this is a wonderful game to have in a starting game collection. It is super inexpensive. It plays with a large number of players. It plays extremely quickly. It by itself actually has expansions, so if you like this game, then you can expand it itself. And the social deduction category, genre, whatever you want to call it, has a lot of other games. Plus, you can just consider it a party game, and there's a ton of different party games as well. I mentioned the expansions for this game. In addition, some of the social deduction games. The very classic one is Werewolf. The problem with the original real Werewolf is that you have to have a moderator and you need a lot of people to really have a fun time. It's more of a convention game nowadays. Much more rarely will you be able to play it at like a friendly local game store, board game night type of thing. That said, they also have Werewolf One Night, which is really fun. It uses an app on your phone that actually keeps track of who's doing what, when, all that kind of stuff. And then there is also from the same company, I believe it's Bizer Games, I don't know how to pronounce the name, but they've also got One Night Vampire. I believe they just finished a Kickstarter for One Night Aliens, all sorts of crazy stuff. In addition to those, we've also got things like Good Cop, Bad Cop, which has a good social deduction mechanic. One of my personal favorite games, Cash and Guns, utilizes social deduction if you use it. It's a variant, it's not required, but you've got the undercover police officer who is potentially calling the cops on the bad guys, on your group of evil people type of thing. So there are a lot of ways that you can build off of the specific things going on in the Resistance. But that said, this game itself is tremendously fun. I really enjoy it. Nowadays I play more Good Cop, Bad Cop simply because it's a little bit more versatile. You get more with items and things like that, although the expansions for the Resistance add a great deal themselves as well. So with all that, the Resistance is my number 4. At number 3, I've got a game that almost stands on its own, similarly to the way that Biblios does. That said, you will see this game on pretty much any list of this sort, where you're talking about how to start a game collection, what are good games to play, what are quick, fast, easy, fun, blah, 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 those types of games. This one is King of Tokyo. That is right. King of Tokyo is a tremendously fun game where you are playing as the infamous monsters trying to destroy Japan. No, there is no copyright infringement, why do you ask? So, the entire point behind this is that you are literally rolling dice and doing sort of set collection with dice. You also have power cards that you're able to purchase that give you different abilities, and like so many games on this list, it's super cheap, very readily available, very fun to play, very quick to learn. The instruction booklet is literally 2 pages, very, very fast. I believe it takes only about a half hour or so to play, somewhere around there. So it's just a very well designed, very tight and fun game. This is a really good game that is good at introducing direct competitiveness within a game. This is something that you don't really see a lot with some of the more simplistic games. In those you see more like the Euro style, oh no, you wanted to buy Boardwalk? I'm so sorry. You know, that type of like Euro style backstabbing. Oh, I'm so sorry that I threw that knife and hit you in the face. In this game it's more like, I'm throwing this knife and it's going to hit you in the face. You know, that very direct adversarial connection sort of thing that you have with the other players. On top of that, this is effectively a game that becomes everybody versus one person, because the one person inside of Tokyo is being attacked by everybody who's outside, and by the same token, the person inside is attacking everybody outside. So it's really cool in that sense, in that getting a good dose of that competitiveness, but in an almost cartoonish kind of way, where, you know, it's a very light-hearted, very low-key, not serious, just fun game. That's really what it is. As far as expandability is concerned, King of Tokyo itself, one of the best expansions is the Powering Up expansion. Highly recommended if you don't have it already. It adds a lot of really good stuff to it and really expands the game and makes it what it probably should have been on initial release. That said, the other really major expansion for this, or the major build-off, is King of New York, and it was literally designed as a more complex version of King of Tokyo. The great thing about King of New York is that it adds a lot of new and different mechanics. The thing is, if you've played King of Tokyo, then you pretty much already know how to play King of New York. You just need to look at some of the things that it adds, where you've got these individual tiles that add a really good bit of randomness. You've already got dice rolling, but you add some more randomness and new point values, new, in this case, since you're in New York, you're going to the different boroughs of all different sorts. It's really, really cool, and not only does it add additional competitiveness, but it also adds a great deal of strategy to it. And in addition, King of New York, I believe, is around the same price as King of Tokyo. The thing is, I highly recommend starting with King of Tokyo if you are beginning a game collection, simply because, again, it's easier to play. That's really what it boils down to. King of New York is more complex. It is very, very fun, and it is reasonably quick to learn, but not quite as quick as King of Tokyo. And for all of that, this is my number 3. At number 2, I've got what is essentially a very simplistic worker placement game. Now, for those of you who have played hobby games before, you know that worker placements make up a surprisingly large percentage of them, but the thing is, they can be extremely, overly, crushingly and infuriatingly complex sometimes. This particular game is very inexpensive, comes from a great company, is a lot of fun to play, gives you a great deal of versatility and all sorts of other wonderful things, in addition to allowing you to have a sort of jumping off point to a bunch of other games. It is Kingsburg. Now, in Kingsburg, it is not a sort of standard worker placement game. In this one, what you're actually doing is just rolling dice, and those dice are acting as your workers. The idea being that you will take your dice, and depending on what values you rolled, you will be influencing different members of the King's Court. So you'll roll dice, and then you take 1, 2, or 3 dice, place them on the person, and then you just go around and everybody does that, that, and that. The great thing about this is I love the versatility and the randomness that the dice give you. If you watched my videos before, you know I generally really do not like dice rolling because it just adds too much randomness to board games, which tend to already be relatively random. But in this case, it is handled very, very well. There are a lot of good mitigating factors in terms of things like giving you good options for low rolls, and you have good options for high rolls. The problem is you're only able to use them once because you have to use all of your dice, or typically you'll have to use all of your dice, things of that nature. The game itself is, like I said, it's resource collection, it's worker placement, you're building up buildings, you're collecting victory points. It's got a lot of these very, very commonly seen mechanics throughout all sorts of different hobby games, and this is a really good way of introducing a lot of those different things. In addition, the way that the rounds progress is also very similar to a lot of other worker placement games, just in terms of during different phases, during rounds, whatever you want to call it, you're doing very specific things, or specific assistance is offered. And on top of that, like with many other of the games on this list, you've got short and long-term planning. In terms of short-term, you've got the immediate boss that you're going to be fighting. In terms of long-term, you got to think about victory points, because that's how you're going to win the game. That said, this builds up, as I mentioned, to pretty much any other worker placement. A good next step for this particular one is Sulk In, the Mayan calendar. So with Sulk In, you've got your little cylinders that you put on the big giant clock, and you're spinning it around and around. That tends to be a little bit more complex. You've got, while you have technically fewer choices, you do have a rather deeper strategy compared to Kingsburg. Kingsburg itself also has a great expansion called To Forge a Realm, which adds different building options. So you have complete cards that allow you to change everything everybody's building. You also have individual strips that will cover up specific sections of the building board. You've got roll cards that you can pick. You can also eliminate some of the randomness with the assistance that the king is giving you, and with fighting the bad guys, all sorts of stuff like that. And really the biggest thing as far as building up, though, is with those worker placement games. Those can be tremendously difficult to get into. There are more simplistic games, or there's games that are slightly more complex. So I mentioned Sulk In, but there's also something like the Manhattan Project, another really fun worker placement that is also thematically pretty fun as well. But then you get games that are more complex, where you've got things like the one I can think of off the top of my head is Tuscany, or Viticulture. It's very, very difficult games, lots of decision making to do, and just very, very complex. Ooh, Kalis. Kalis is a really classic example of worker placement as well. That said, if you've played Kingsburg, then you know, at least if you have an interest in that worker placement mechanic, so you can sort of take the baby steps from there to get into it. As I mentioned, it is sort of notoriously one of the more difficult things in gaming, but Kingsburg is a great way to introduce yourself not only to worker placement, but again, a lot of these different mechanics that you'll see very frequently. And that's why it is my number 2. At number 1, I've got a game that is not only one of my favorite games of all time, but it is also a wonderful example of a cooperative game. It is Pandemic! Yes, we are finally here at Pandemic and number 1. Now, there are a lot of reasons I love this game. I love the theme, because I'm a scientist. I love the fact that it's co-op, because co-op games tend to be a lot less creating bad feelings amongst the players and things of that nature. This also has some wonderful expansions that add on a lot of really, really cool mechanics. This also has a very good, tightly designed game in and of itself. It is very well done. You've got a lot of versatility in the box just in terms of what are you going to add, how much are you going to add, all of that kind of stuff. With the expansions, you have the bioterrorist, which is sort of like a trader mechanic. You've got additional special cards. You've got additional virulence cards, the epidemic cards. You've got the modular expansions that you can add on, all that good stuff. But that said, the really cool thing that you can build off with this is other co-op games. This is a really wonderful example of how you can do a co-op game very, very well. I love other co-op games as well, so we've got things like Shadows over Camelot, great trader mechanic, Battlestar Galactica, extremely complex, tremendously fun though. If you get a chance, highly recommend you play it, and you get to play as the Cylons, also known as the traders in that case. Other relatively simple co-op games, you've got things like Castle Panic is a great example of a relatively simple cooperative play game. That would also be good as a starter game. I personally prefer Pandemic as a starter simply because by itself it's really easily expandable. It's got great expansions to it, and I prefer the versatility that just comes in the base box as well. But again, if you like the co-op aspect of Pandemic, then you can really easily build into other co-op games, and on top of that, the expansions for it add a lot of different mechanics that you see in other hobby games as well. So you've got resource allocation, resource collection, you've got a lot of different cooperative elements in terms of assigning people specific jobs and things of that nature, just all sorts of different stuff. That said, the current version is not the one that I have. There is a new version out, but again, readily available, very inexpensive. I believe it's even available like Target and Walmart and stuff like that. Go and get it if you haven't done so already. It's an awesome, awesome game, and that's why it's my #1. Alright everybody, that's it for me and my top 5 favorite games that you can start a board gaming collection with. Like I mentioned, this is a tremendously enormous category. You may notice I didn't have anything like war games on this. I personally don't think that it's a great idea to start a collection with a war game, but if you're a huge fan of history or specific battles or whatever it happens to be, maybe starting off with a war game is something that you want to do. So as always, please let me know anything and everything that you think about this in the comments below. What are your personal starter games? What are the games that you started with? That is something that would be really interesting to know as well. I would love to hear anything and everything you guys think. Thank you so very much for watching this, and I will see you next time. Thank you so much again, everybody, for watching my top 5 favorite starter games. Again, this is a really big category that's sort of unusual, even compared to a lot of the other unusual videos that I've done. It really comes down to personal taste. Do you really prefer theme? Do you prefer a specific mechanic? All of that kind of stuff. And the fact is, if you simply don't know, then you simply don't know if you're going to like a game or not. With that, as always, I've got several of my playlists linked up at the top of the page so that you can see some more of my work. And if you want to see more of me in the future, click on that big giant subscribe button. Please do make sure that you leave any and all thoughts in the comments below, because with this one particularly, I would love to hear your guys' thoughts about the mentality of starting up in the gaming hobby. With that, thank you so much again for watching, and I will see you next time.